Declassified.
So, this is where the fun begins.
A roundtable discussion about Star Wars, the Clone Wars.
Here we go.
Need laser collectors!
Maximum firepower.
Move!
All batteries return fire.
Oh, yes, sir!
Now it's time for Clone Wars Declassified.
Oh. I have used the words perfect, flawless, and, well, about damn time. How about that to describe the latest episode of the Clone Wars? We couldn't wait. And we've got another one right around the corner on Monday, and you better believe we'll be back here. Rebel Force Radio, Clone Wars Declassified. So glad to be with you. If you're within the sound of our voices right now, we are broadcasting live, and we are thrilled to usher in another hour and a half of Star Wars discussion, this time about Episode 11 of Season 7 in the Clone Wars, Shattered. And if you are a Star Wars fan, then this episode probably did leave you a bit shattered emotionally. Considering how much we know about these characters, how much we have watched their fates play out in television series and films, it doesn't seem to matter because we're still, at least I was, and I think a lot of the fans that I've talked to, friends that are fans, we're on the edge of our seats throughout this episode. It really is incredible. And so glad to be back with you here, RFR, Clone Wars Declassified. We got a great conversation that lies ahead of us. So much. We're down to one more episode, guys and gals. One more episode. And to usher in this conversation is, of course, we'll start with my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. What, there was a new Clone Wars episode this week?
Yeah, it was it was sort of a thing.
Oh, that thing I stayed up till 2:30 in the morning waiting for the other night and then watched it 3 times in a row. Yeah, that thing. Oh, sure. I'm up for talking about it if you are. I don't know. Was there any meat on the bones in this episode?
There was some meat. There was some, that big thing, that brontosaurus steak that gets thrown on top of Fred Flintstone's car at the beginning of the Flintstones. That's how much meat was on the bones of this episode.
Good Lord. Well, I'll tell you, there's a lot of good crossover into Revenge of the Sith and some shocking, stunning, edge-of-your-seat developments, moments that we always thought would take place, and now we're finally seeing it all unfold as Clone Wars really solidifies itself into the Episode 3 timeline. So I'm looking forward to breaking it all down with you, Jason, and our esteemed roundtable guests.
Oh, and they are esteemed. Let's start with my brother in the Force, your brother in the flesh, our good buddy Billy Mack, joining us.
How you doing, everybody?
I love it.
Get that out of the way.
Well, yes, that's what people expect. But I love that you're in this this man cave right now. This is
totally
incredible.
Totally,
I love it. You got some Marx brothers. It's the Marx brothers back there, right? And behind you, is that what it is?
Yeah. It's an old Marx Brothers poster at the circus.
Beautiful, awesome.
See that?
Well, Bill, it's great to have you here. I don't think we have actually spoken to you about Season 7 of the Clone Wars yet.
No, I don't think I've been on. You guys didn't do roundtables for Rebels, did you?
Yeah, every single episode.
Yeah, we're pretty sure you sat in on it.
Seems like I haven't done a roundtable in a long time.
Well, it doesn't matter how long. We're glad that you're back. And rounding out the
I'm sorry.
Oh, yes.
Just want to jump in here real quick. Can we confirm we're actually streaming live right now? I'm having a difficult time.
Yeah, we're streaming live as far as I can tell. I'm looking at the chat. We got the live chat going on here.
Okay, and, on YouTube and Facebook?
YouTube and Facebook. Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're not just talking out into the void.
No.
And people are actually listening live. I don't know what I'm looking at here, but it doesn't look like Rebel Force Radio. So
okay.
it might be on a page for an entirely different show. So
all right.
Well, I work my way out of this mess.
Yes, I'll introduce our our next guest. We've known him for a heck of a long time. He's well, it might surprise you, but he really is a nice guy. Kevin Liell. joining us.
Hey, everybody.
I say that, Kevin, because, you got that gruff exterior, but inside you're just as soft and cuddly as a Ewok on a Endor Saturday night.
Well, Ewoks are carnivores and they eat people, so okay, I'll take that.
Okay, all right.
Just for the record, Jimmy, we actually are live on Facebook.
Oh,
on YouTube.
Yeah,
I can see it
but
here.
see what's going to happen
all
is
the way in glorious Connecticut.
You're streaming it, and you're streaming your signal, and it's going to get all messed up. So you don't have to watch yourself. You can exit out of that.
I'm not going to.
Okay.
Oh, well.
All right. Yeah. Don't get caught up in the vanity of it. But I know it's tempting because you're here on Rebel Force Radio and we are streaming live. Let's talk about episode 11 of season 7. Let's give you the tale of the tape as we do. The original air date for this episode was May 1st, 2020. And as I said, episode 12 of season 7 will air on, when else? May the 4th. And as I say, Rebel Force Radio Clone Wars Declassified will be back here in just a couple of days to break that all down with you as well. Directed by Saul Ruiz, written by Dave Filoni. The episode title is Shattered. Production number was for season 7, episode 23. So I got to tell you, it's going to be hard for me to keep. Well, objective's not the right word. But to keep my passions at bay, because I really, really believe that this was Star Wars storytelling at its most basic and its finest. Big themes, mythology galore, and just that whole notion of knights and soldiers and epic battles, and it just I absolutely was thrilled with it. From the beginning to the end, I just thought that it was really perfect. I didn't think that there was a line out of place. I didn't think there was a moment out of place. But of course, it's a big community out there, not just our roundtable, but also those of you listening live, 708-866-1737. That is the number to call, 708-866-1737. And we'll be taking your calls in just a little bit. But first, I want to kick things off at the very beginning of this episode. It picks up right as episode 10 ended, and we see the imprisoned Darth Maul. He's all tied up, nowhere to go, but they're on Mandalore. And Bo-Katan greets Ahsoka, and something she said, Jim, I find kind of interesting. She was impressed that Ahsoka was able to capture Maul. And I know there's a couple different ways you can read it. You could read it as, okay, this younger girl was able to capture this, incredible dark warrior that all these Mandalorians weren't able to keep at bay. But I thought that she was sort of implying, if it would have been me, I would have killed him. I wouldn't have captured him. And Ahsoka replies, well, that's what the council wanted. But am I interpreting that right, that perhaps that's what Bo-Katan was getting at?
No, I think you're dead on. I mean, I don't think that there were going to be any more games played with Darth Maul. They certainly weren't going to try him. Mandalorians do imprison people, though. I mean, Almec was imprisoned. Even Satine, back in the day, they threw her in the clinker. So it's not beyond them, but you can see a guy like Maul is very difficult to contain. So, I mean, even the potential of getting him to trial, they had to use that one special Mandalorian box. They had, none of them were around, but they were used to hold force wielders like Jedi at bay and contain them. And it had definitely a Hannibal Lecter vibe to it.
Oh, yeah.
As they brought him out, right? And then when they revealed him within, he was wearing the Hannibal Lecter mask, I don't think that mask was there for social distancing protection and things like that.
Well, I sort of thought that it was maybe a breathing apparatus that he had there for
I think it was
being able to breathe in that thing.
Yeah.
It was to keep him from speaking, because the thing is that the Jedi would say, these aren't the droids you're looking for, so to speak. And if he can't say it, how can he give the command? Like, unlock the door.
So it was it was built. In fact, it's called a force-proof, some sort of force-proof capsule that dates back to, well, we know that there's a long story history between the Mandalorians and the Jedi. That's something. That's one of the things
I'm sorry, Jason,
No, it's
but
all right.
I just wanted to point out there was a graphic on the front of the box that appeared to me to be a take on the original Mandalore. There was an individual named Mandalore who basically established the entire culture for that system and the warriors that it produced. His name was Mandalore. And so he's from the old Dark Horse comic books. And I could swear I saw a little tribute to him on the front of that capsule. Did you catch it, Liell?
I know. I saw the Mandalorian mask. I didn't know specifically it was Mandalore. I guess they also mentioned that in like halfway through Star Wars Rebels, they had that story where they talked about the original Mandalore that created the dark saber thousands of years ago.
Right.
That was Rebels, right?
Yes. That was I think a season 4 episode that featured that Mandalorian that they were running with. Right.
And if I'm not mistaken, that Mandalore from way back when, isn't he an ancestor of like pre-Vizsla or the Vizsla clan?
Yeah, he was.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about the old Dark Horse. They just called him Mandalore. The dude's name was Mandalore.
That was his name. Oh, okay. So the fact that the council wanted Maul alive, one of the things that jumped out at me was that, practically at this same moment as the council is saying, capture Maul, bring him in, you got Mace Windu moments later that's going to be screaming at Anakin saying, he's too dangerous to be kept alive, talking about Palpatine, and all these events are, happening at the same time. And Kevin, I know that this stuff is sometimes it's kind of hard to all keep straight, but when Ahsoka is talking to Bo-Katan, she suggests that the Mandalorians need a new kind of leader. And Bo-Katan obviously starts thinking of her sister Satine, who tried to usher in an era of pacifism to the Mandalorians. But this is kind of foreshadowing of, obviously, the future of Mandalore and what we end up seeing happen to the Mandalorian people throughout Rebels and then in the TV series The Mandalorian itself. So, though it seems that things have kind of settled, they've won the Battle of Mandalore, this is far from over based on what we know of Star Wars history, right?
Absolutely. The Empire, sometime after the fall of the Jedi, sometime roughly 16 or 17 years before the events of Rebels, that we see that has Bo-Katan in it. Because I'm thinking that's the second or third season, which was basically like 2 or 3 years before A New Hope, which would place it like 15 years from this episode. So there a lot of changes actually come to Mandalore. So she apparently doesn't get that leadership position that Ahsoka was talking about. But one of the parts I liked about that was that scene where she says goodbye to Bo-Katan, Ahsoka, and she gets on that vessel and flies. There's it almost seems like 3 or 4 minutes where there's no dialogue. There's just Ahsoka walking, and you're thinking about all the things that she's thinking about. She's got Darth Maul here. She's got this problem with Anakin. And it wasn't like I was dying to hear dialogue. Just watching her and watching that character act through that scene in silence. And then she finally, breaks down and starts talking to Rex about it. I just thought that was a great scene. It's probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, the whole episode.
Yeah. There's so much that's just jumping out at you. I found it was the fastest 20 minutes I can remember in a long time, because you're soaking everything up. It feels familiar in some ways. You're like, I've been here before, but not from this angle, not in this particular way. Bill, we see a familiar scene in this episode, one that we've seen as Star Wars fans many, many times since 2005. The scene when they're the Jedi Council are sitting around or standing around talking about how this is going to be a big test. They've got Grievous. They've taken Grievous, Obi-Wan has, and they dispatch Anakin Skywalker to go deliver the news to Chancellor Palpatine, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. And they say, depending on how he takes the news, they're going to know what his intentions are. And then Mace Windu says something that I never really paid much attention to until this episode. He talks about how if Palpatine doesn't give up his powers, then the Jedi would have to take control of the Galactic Senate to ensure a peaceful transition. This was the first time I looked at it like, that is kind of an overreach. I mean, if you cut off the head of the snake, wouldn't that work? Why would they need to take over the entire Senate?
Yeah, This got my thinking back to that whole conversation we had. What was that, a year or so ago, about the coup and whether or not this represented a coup and all that.
The coup d'etat?
Well, it's so complicated because they're in a position. I mean, if they find out he's a Sith Lord with, forget the Sith Lord for a second. If they find out that he has plans to basically become a dictator, to lead a totalitarian empire, they're really bound to act. And that whole coup conversation kept going in my head, and I started thinking, well, in order for it to be a coup,
my brother was right. That's what you were thinking. Boy, Jim sure was right about that.
Well, it's a complex issue, and one of the reasons it's so complex because we don't know what the law is. And I think my whole issue with that from the beginning was coup implies that number one, they're doing something illegal, and number two, that they're looking to do it for their own power, to take over. This conversation pretty clearly says that they do intend to take over if they have to get rid of Palpatine. The question is are they bound to do that? Are they legally bound? They might be. I mean, as we don't really know what the function of the Jedi, the Jedi Council is to the Republic. I mean, at least in writing, I don't think. I mean, unless they spell this out, unless there's some, expanded universe law book that explains this relationship.
I don't think Palpatine would let any sort of organization allowed to operate under his leadership that had the ability to pull the plug on him legally at any given moment. The guy covered his bases. So I would think that the Jedi do not have those kind of unlimited powers where they are obliged to step in and insert themselves as the government.
Well, he hasn't fully taken over yet, so we don't know that that's the case. I mean,
it's still a democracy. At this point, it's still a democracy.
There's still a semblance of a democracy, and if the Chancellor is seen as, the head of the Senate, and the Jedi took his place, even temporarily, then they would be taking over the Senate, at least in a temporary capacity. I don't really know what other choice they would have. Are they supposed to, if they find out he's a Sith Lord, they're just supposed to allow him to continue to take over power?
No, if it's a democracy,
they have to do something.
Vote. If it's a democracy, you put it to a vote.
Well, that's the issue that keeps going in my head. I mean, he's already proven himself to have the type of influence, a supernatural influence over the events.
Right. See, that's the thing. So the Jedi would lean on that, right? I mean, wouldn't the Jedi say?
They're in a war. I mean, they have to act. I mean, they have to do something. I mean, the risk is too great. Yeah. I mean, it's just like, when this is a much smaller scale, but police, if there's imminent danger, they don't have to sit around wait for warnings.
Well, but you raised a good question though, Bill, about what is really the role of the Jedi. They're keepers of the peace. We know that they're sent in as negotiators and diplomats, but now, when they talk about taking over and they are the generals of the military, this feels like, your typical Banana Republic story where the army, the military takes over. Kevin, any thoughts about this discussion as we think about what role the military vis-a-vis the Jedi play and why they would feel that they must take control of the Senate to ensure a peaceful transition when we're really talking about
Well, they mentioned in Revenge of the Sith and in these episodes that the Senate had voted him extended powers, which gave him basically extended War Act policies, much like FDR and Lincoln had during their respective wars. And they think that the Senate has given him too much power, and then once the war is over, once Grievous is dead and the war is finished, that he needs to relinquish those powers immediately, and that's why they went to the office and tried to illegally arrest Emperor Palpatine, who was the legal ruler of the galaxy, and I support Palpatine.
Whoa.
You support Palpatine. See, this is the weird aspect of this whole conversation. You support Palpatine because of the law, so you think he should remain in power. That's allowable because the law is above.
Yes.
The law has a higher value than the human beings at risk.
I'm a supporter of Palpatine.
And Palpatine didn't do anything illegal.
Technically not. He was voted into office. He was given these extended powers, and then all of a sudden the Mace Windu and Samuel Jackson and all of his friends heard that he could be a Sith Lord.
Samuel Jackson. Now there's two of them.
Now there are two of them.
They went to his office and they start brandishing weapons. I mean, come on, the guy's the legal ruler. He led the galaxy in the biggest war the galaxy's ever seen. He's about to win it, and they're going to knock him out.
Right. They should have assassinated him.
But they know that that's not the full story, and they're the ones to know. That's why they're there. The Jedi are there to detect these things. I mean, I think at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, Kenobi actually says to Palpatine, Sith Lords are our specialty. That's why they're there. That's the only reason why they're helping the Republic. They're duty bound to snuff this stuff out. And they've figured out this guy's a Sith Lord. And you're saying they got to sit around and put it to a vote? I think that's absurd.
No.
That's what they wanted. That's what they wanted. They wanted to arrest Palpatine. And
Palpatine
should have gone in there and cut his head off.
Palpatine has
needs to go on trial.
Palpatine.
That's what he says.
If you want to speak in strictly legal terms, Palpatine has already behaved in a completely treasonous manner because he's given walking orders to the other side in this conflict, which he totally orchestrated.
Right, he's playing both sides, and that's known at this point.
It's a war crime.
Right. Is that? Do they have proof of it though?
Well, I mean, that's what.
Well, the Jedi know more than everybody else.
Listen. Let's get back into the Clone Wars.
We are, but no, I agree. We got to move on. This would be a great roundtable in and of itself.
Oh my God, we spent like 4 episodes the last year.
Yeah, and we can move on, but it's relevant to this episode because we did get a little background here that we didn't have before.
Oh, I did say it wasn't relevant, and I enjoyed the conversation. I just think it's time to dive into the episode a little more.
We do.
I agree. All right.
And so thank you to everybody. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about episode 11 of the Clone Wars season 7, Shattered, with Billy Mack, Jimmy Mack, and Kevin Liell. There is a moment, Jim, when we see the other end of this iconic hologram session of Jedi Council members, when we're watching Revenge of the Sith, we have no idea that Ahsoka Tano is there. It's just incredible to have that kind of added on now, to our experience when we watch ROTS, ROTS. But there's that moment when Yoda hangs back and he talks to, before he hangs back, there's that moment when Ahsoka says that she did her duty as a Republic citizen. Yoda says, not as a Jedi, and Ahsoka says, no, not yet. What do you think she means by that? Is she plotting at that point? Not plotting, that's not the right word, but is she thinking about a return to the Jedi ways? Why does she say no, not yet, to the question of her duty, fulfilling her duty?
In the past, Ahsoka has definitely shown the ability to read visions in the Force about the future, and it hasn't been revealed if she has actually received a vision, But we know Darth Maul has, and he shared the information about his vision with Ahsoka, and she's keeping that quiet to herself about the eventual fall to the dark side of Anakin Skywalker and how he would become the pawn and apprentice to Darth Sidious. So Ahsoka's bracing herself for that. Even Captain Rex seems surprised she didn't share that information with the Council. So I think Ahsoka is looking to do things that may be outside of the law of the Jedi Order, to be able, maybe she anticipates having to tap into, maybe she's dancing on the dark side a little bit right now. Let's face it, she's taken on Maul now as an ally in certain terms. I mean, she's kind of using him at the same time, but there's still a loose teamwork there going on. I think Ahsoka knows she has to do things that there might be things that are required of her that a Jedi can't necessarily do. A by-the-book Jedi can't necessarily.
So that's why she says not yet. That she still has other things to do. That if she was fully back in the ways of the Jedi, she would be handcuffed, essentially.
Yeah. I think it has to do with Anakin turning to the dark side. I think she anticipates having to tap into something maybe un-Jedi to be able to save him. And she doesn't want to commit to the Jedi Council. She wants to keep her options open at this point.
Can I make a small point?
Please.
No.
Only small points, Kevin. Only small.
Okay, so this will be a medium point. I think also she was kind of ruminating because the fact that, and she says in the episode that she's been a soldier since she was a Padawan, and she used to be a peacekeeper and not a soldier. And she's been that basically the last 3 years, and she's done doing that. And I thought that was kind of alluding to the fact that if this war was over and there was peace, that she would go back to the Jedi.
Yes.
Damn it, Kevin, you jumped ahead. We're going to come back to that. But I think you've interpreted it incorrectly. And I'll explain in just a moment. But my next question is for you, which is, why do you think when Yoda hangs back and he asks Ahsoka if she has a message for Anakin Skywalker, this was the perfect time for her to tell Jedi Master Yoda, who is probably proven to be one of the more open-minded, I think, Jedi. Anakin turned to Yoda when he was having his concerns about Padme. He didn't give a Mace Windu answer or an Obi-Wan answer. He gave a fairly thoughtful answer, maybe not the one that Anakin was looking for. But nonetheless, I feel that Yoda is probably one of the more open-minded, and yet she completely misses the opportunity to say, hey, Darth Maul said something really strange to me. He said that Anakin was going to figure into the Sith Lord Sidious's plot as some sort of apprentice. She had the perfect opportunity to tell Yoda. Why don't you think she did?
A couple things. I felt her loyalty to Anakin, she wanted to talk to him first about it. There's also probably a little, maybe 30% was the fact that she didn't believe Maul. I mean, nobody believes Maul. Maul's not someone to be trusted. And but that is a good point. How Yoda detected that she wanted to stay, and maybe there was something that she needed to say, and he could tell. Because remember that conversation you're talking about that he had with Anakin, if I'm not mistaken, was maybe that same day or the day before. So maybe he has an idea that something's up.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. The timeliness of that, or the timing of those two moments is actually very close. I apologize to those that are joining live into the panel. I missed a detail when I was setting up the show, and I want to be able to get to your calls. So we're going to have to call into our secret switchboard here. So that way we can pop you on. So just give me a moment here.
We need to make a checklist before each show. But while Jason's doing that, I want to talk about something.
I can't have you talk about anything right now. I need absolute silence. I need absolute silence.
Wait. It's been 15 years, and you guys just thought of a checklist now?
No, a checklist wouldn't have mattered because we had some technical difficulties right before we started. So you can stuff your checklist in a sack.
Jason forgot
in your sack.
Sir Viagra. But okay, well then, everyone just hang.
Remain in a holding pattern for the time being.
That's right. That's right.
Well, we could go all night without taking calls, but I don't think we want to do that.
No, that wouldn't be fair to all of your wonderful viewers.
Absolutely.
Which I used to be one. I still am one.
I hope so.
I've listened to every episode since 2006.
You haven't let all this go to your head, like being on the show and stuff like that, right?
I am, to be honest.
Thank you for calling.
All right, everybody quiet.
Host and call screener line. Please enter your show number and press pound.
This is great TV. I know you're riveted.
I'm scared.
You did not enter a show number. Goodbye.
Well, for our longtime listeners, you know this happens from time to time. So it's worth it because this is the only way we can actually take your calls. So let's try it again. Quiet on the set.
Thank you for calling Call-In Studios host and call screener line. Please enter your show number and press pound. Enter your 6-digit PIN number. Welcome, host.
There we go.
You are now in the host room and can manage your callers from the Call-In Studio web interface.
Oh, look at the switchboard. Wow.
Hello, am I on? Hello, am I on? I have a question from Philadelphia.
There's one in every crowd.
I'll take a large pie with
checklist.
Checklist.
I'm going to remember that, Mac. Checklist.
Ground beef. Can you put some ground beef on there? No, I kind of like that. Maybe some jalapenos.
All right.
Is there someone on the line or not?
Okay, so I want to get back to this this history of the Jedi and the Mandos because I'll be honest, you know me. I don't read books. I don't read comics. All I know is what I see, what is spoon-fed to me through audio and visual entertainment. But, Jim, I know probably of this whole group, not to take away anything from anyone else, I would consider you probably the most astute Star Wars timeline historian. So I want to talk a little bit about the Mandalorian history with the Jedi because the first reference of there being a conflict between the Mandalorians and the Jedi goes back to, I believe, is it a Topps trading card?
That's your question for me, is to identify some rando top trading.
No, there's more. There's a follow-up to this. There's more, believe me, but I want to plot it out.
Here, Jason. I came here to talk about Clone Wars and not necessarily history of Mandalorian, but go ahead. Throw one at me. I can't answer that first question about the trading card, though.
You can't. We did a whole investigative report about the first time that Mandalorian was actually mentioned.
It was about 8 years ago. And you had nothing to do with it. I did all the research there anyway. So, but I don't remember. I don't remember this trading card you talk about.
You're so much attitude all of a sudden.
That's just, well, you know why? Because you're really going off into some kind of weird deep end here. I was not prepared for. I have to admit.
But I want to talk about what we know about the Jedi history with the Mandalorians. We know that they met in the Clone Wars. That was talked about. That there was, I could ask Kevin, he might know. So
the most important thing about the Mandalorian history with the Jedi for me, especially when it comes to the Clone Wars, is the fact that when Boba Fett was originally identified, he was identified as wearing the armor of a army of shock trooper soldiers who the Jedi defeated in the Clone Wars.
That's the answer I'm looking for right there.
Yes. So I'm sorry. I don't mean to be snippy with you and everything, but I just the trading card thing threw me off. So I apologize for being a douche.
a lifetime of apologies.
Just this time.
Oh, hey, wait! I'm not apologizing for anything else with this conversation. All the other douchebag things I did, I do not apologize for.
But here's what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is that in the long history of what we've seen, the long history of Star Wars, both on screen, off screen, is that we've heard about these conflicts between the Jedi and the Mandalorians, going back to Empire Strikes Back and the unveiling of Boba Fett and identifying him with this group of troopers that that went against the Jedi during the Clone Wars. But there's also something we've learned in The Mandalorian when the armorer talks about the ancient sorcerers that she had heard about, and that there was a conflict between the Mandalorians and what we assume are either the Jedi or a precursor to the Jedi. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that these two forces, the force wielders, and that's what Bo-Katan calls Darth Maul, a crazy force wielder, and they have that contraption that dates back to this ancient conflict. So I'm just trying to draw a connection between perhaps what the armorer is talking about in The Mandalorian and that ancient conflict with these sorcerers and this contraption we see that Maul is put in, and then therefore we've got now this conflict in the Clone Wars. So this history of the two.
Pre Vizsla seemed to talk a lot about the history of the friction between the Jedi and the Mandalorians. And he seemed to almost refer to the Jedi as the natural enemy of the Mandalorians. And he seemed upset that Satine was taking away this tradition of Mandalorian versus Jedi. And not only that, Satine was tight with the Jedi too. Mm-hmm. So that was, probably a big deal why the Death Watch was sent off to that moon, and there was a big schism between, throughout the society to stand with either the traditional Mandalorian warrior ways and, of course, then the new pacifism that Satine was inspiring in Mandalore. So I think it's just like a traditional thing, It's the Mandalorians sometimes remind me of the Klingons in that aspect, where it's just like, we were born to be warriors. We have the blood of warriors. We hear the drum beats of war pounding in our ears, all that crazy stuff. It's very similar. And so naturally, as warriors, they need to go to war. And it seems like the Jedi are traditional enemies of the Mandalorians. And Bo-Katan, she has inherited that tradition that the Death Watch and Pre Vizsla was trying, they were struggling to keep alive. Well, she is really the final torchbearer of all of their efforts at this point. She's leading the Death Watch into a future as legitimate Mandalorian leadership.
Well, that's a good point. I wanted to actually talk to the only one on the panel that has actually served in the military, and of course, Kevin, we've always take any opportunity we can to thank you for your service to the United States. But
thank you, sir.
It's this question, I think, is befitting a soldier, because in the beginning of the episode, you have Bo-Katan that says that she wishes that she was good for something other than war. You have Ahsoka, and you brought this point up earlier, but you were just slightly off, I think, because she actually doesn't say that I've just spent the last 3 years as a soldier. She says that all she's known as a Jedi is being a soldier. She's never known the opportunity to be a keeper of the peace. And so you've got these two characters talking about how that they've never really had an opportunity to do anything other than be good or be good at or fighting a war. And then you've got Rex, on the other hand, that goes, well, if there was no war, there would have been no reason for me to even be born, to be created. And they're staring down the barrel of the end of this conflict and what it means for all of them. And I didn't know if maybe you could lend some insight in, when you are a warrior, or you're bred to do that, or you're built to do that, you're trained to do that, what do you think about peacetime? And what do you think's going through the minds of someone like Bo-Katan or Rex or even Ahsoka?
Well, I think it's different for Rex, because Rex was born and raised and bred for war. Probably he was told that war is coming, and then when he was 10 years old, obviously he was because of advanced acceleration with his age, he was a full-grown person. But basically, he was a small child and was given a gun and said the Clone War just started, and this would have been before this episode. It would have been 3 years before. So his entire adult life, he's been fighting a war, and the 10 years before that, he was preparing for it. So his his time training and stuff like that was far different than mine. I was in the Army in the 90s, which was probably the best time to be in the Army. It was before the 2 wars that we had in the Middle East. And so back to your question. What was your question again?
Well, I'm hoping that you can give some insight into the mind of a warrior when they realize that the time for their purpose in life is over.
Well, okay, so that's why that was my point. So the thing is that he was trained to be a warrior, and that's it. He wasn't going to retire and own a paint store or something like that. Whereas most of your soldiers today, especially if they're in combat, and if they were in Iraq or Afghanistan, is that they want peace. They want to go home and have this to be over with. He doesn't have that option. He can't do anything else because there's him and 10 million more just like him that were just trained to do this. He could probably become a cop or something like that, but in his mind of thinking, there's no other option for me to be a warrior. But then again, we find out that he does find something else to do, and he goes fishing on that weird planet with the giant lizards.
That's right. He does. It's a really poignant moment, and I like that they actually sort of confront it through 3 characters: Ahsoka's character, Rex's character, and Bo-Katan's character. About when you're that's what you're bred for, and then you see a future where you don't have a purpose. I thought it was really interesting, and I'm seeing on the chat, by the way, thank you so much. We've got as the late great Gorilla Monsoon would say, we have a capacity crowd here joining us live, and we appreciate it so much. They're hanging from the rafters here for Rebel Force Radio Declassified.
There's been some good activity happening there in the chat room. I've been looking at it. Chad says, how about that music? I was picking up some vibes from the Blade Runner soundtrack. I certainly was. I think it was one of Kevin Kiner's finest efforts. It was amazing. It was just absolutely amazing.
And there certainly was some Revenge of the Sith music in there.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, totally.
But I do want to let everyone know that the Kiner scores for these episodes are available all on iTunes.
Oh, great.
So each episode is getting its own release.
That little bit of electronica in there, like when they were showing the troopers, that scene right before Ahsoka finds the room with all the droids in it, and they're kind of running around the corridors, and there's this like thing going on. Very, very kind of John Carpenter. Tangerine Dream, maybe, something like that. That was kind of cool. A little different for Star Wars, so I like that. That moment. Jace, one thing I want to add, I'm fascinated with that idea that you brought up about clone troopers. I wish the mythology kind of hit on it a little bit more. Not a ton. I like that it was hinted at in this episode about this. Really, it gets to a bigger subject about the ethics of breeding people for warfare. That's that's a pretty big topic right there. But yeah, what happens post-war? And after World War II, there's a whole slew of movies that were made about that. Best Years of Our Lives, Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. Later on with Vietnam, First Blood. People trying to find their way after having commanded a lot of power sometimes, during war and trying to adjust to home life. I like that it's hinted at.
I do too. And
explore that a little bit.
Something I would love to see detailed is the transition that some of these clones make from being clone troopers to Imperial stormtroopers. I know it's not an overnight thing. Clearly, it takes years, decades for some, but it would be interesting to see what happens with them.
Do they become?
Some of them do. I believe that's canon. That some of them do. But by the time I think we get into the original trilogy era, that most of them have died out, petered out.
Mm-hmm. That would be fascinating. I'd like to see the real story of that.
All right, everyone's talking about on the chat. Let's get to Order 66, Swank. You're burying the lead of this episode. Of course, we have to talk about it, and we will. Now that the switchboard is open, we'll just 708-866-1737. Lines are all full, but as we take calls, those lines, of course, become open. So please keep trying, and we will pop you on as soon as we're able to. But let's talk about this. We see the big moment. We see Order 66 as it occurs. We see what happens finally between Rex and Ahsoka. Here's just a little Jim, I think for you, interesting use of all the different vocal mixes. You've got the cast of the Clone Wars, guys like his name just T.C. Carson, who does the voice very aptly of Mace Windu, but being thrown into the same episode where we actually hear the real Samuel L. Jackson or the real Mace Windu, or the
same with film. Matt and Hayden,
which is interesting. And I gotta say, I would have really liked to have heard Matt's take on some of that Hayden dialogue that happens in Palpatine's office. So it's kind of interesting that they felt bullish and confident enough to mix up all those voices together.
Right. Well, we hear all those voices in our heads all the time anyway. So I got to admit, when the Clone Wars first debuted in 2008, that was something that was heavily on my mind a lot of times. It wasn't so much like, what's Matt Lanter going to do with the character of Anakin? It was more like, is Matt Lanter going to be a convincing enough Hayden Christensen version of Anakin Skywalker? I wasn't really thinking about how new actors can put their mark on the role. I wanted more straight up voice doubling, and you don't really get that so much from Matt. And I don't think he ever really did, but yet he slid into that role almost just so naturally. Now, of course, with Jat, he does voice doubling. I mean, that's just what he does. He's a very gifted mimic, and if you're going to have him play the role of Obi-Wan, he is going to sound as much like Ewan McGregor as possible. That's just his art, But I think definitely Matt had more leeway with Anakin.
He did. That's a good point. And by the way, if you haven't watched or listened to, I should say, the latest episode of Rebel Force Radio, we have just a phenomenal interview with Matt Lanter, and he gets emotional at times about his legacy and playing Anakin Skywalker, and as he's experiencing his episodes in real time with us. And it's phenomenal, but that's a great point that Jim brings up, which is that of all of the actors to recreate roles of these iconic characters, Matt probably had the greatest challenge and also the greatest opportunity, I think, to make it his own, because it seems clear when you hear Matt say in this interview that he was asked by Dave Filoni to give him his best combination Luke Skywalker and Han Solo in his audition. That tells me that they were looking for a different take on that character.
True. Very true.
Yeah. Well, Hayden Christensen had I'm not sure how much of this has to do with his process, but it was almost like I heard Christopher Walken explain one time that he really liked to emphasize words that normally people would not emphasize. And of course, if you've ever heard somebody impersonate him, you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And Hayden Christensen almost has that. So, in a way, I'm really glad he didn't try to duplicate it, because it's so kind of idiosyncratic the way that Christensen talked.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I've always been a big fan of Hayden, because I thought he was very influenced by James Earl Jones and his pattern of speech. For example, there's the one line when he says, "To find my mother," and you could almost feel or hear a James Earl Jones to say, "To find my mother." The way that James Earl Jones kind of hits those words, but I never really equated it to Christopher Walken, which I think Bill makes a really good point. I think that, guys, we've got so much more to go through, but let's open up the phone lines here. Jim, you're shaking your head. What's wrong?
Well, I don't think there's any connection between the way Hayden delivered those lines and in episode 2 and James Earl Jones and his delivery of dialogue in the original trilogy. I don't think George Lucas presented that idea to Hayden, and I don't think Hayden brought that idea to the table either. I don't think he was consciously thinking, maybe I can sound just a little bit like I can deliver this line.
Why would he not? Why would an actor that's been cast in that role and who's working for a director who's notoriously lax in giving actors direction, why would he not go in there and study the character that his character evolves into? When you look at when we first meet him, and he's walking into the bar with Obi-Wan, and he says, "I am trying," Yeah, he's definitely pulling a James Earl Jones pattern of speech.
I would love to hear.
Can I cut in here for a second? Can I cut in here for a second? Because
address that.
I've never thought of that, but if you think about it, there are times like when Vader kills Captain Nita and he says, "Apology accepted." There are these things when you get a vowel that James Earl Jones likes to stretch it out. And he's done that throughout playing Darth Vader in all three of the original movies.
Yeah, but
including the no at the end of Revenge of the Sith.
I think that would be messing with the actor's head going into a scene like that if he didn't have full collaboration with the director prior to it, especially on a project
actors
like
actors don't collaborate with George. He's not a collaborative director. He doesn't care. He'll fix everything in post.
It's a ballsy move to try to impersonate.
Well, not necessarily an impersonation, but incorporating it somehow. I mean, it's not totally implausible. I mean, I know De Niro, tried to do that with, with Vito Corleone and Godfather.
That is true.
That's incorporate. There's other,
But that also is Robert.
He kind of did the raspy,
that's
raspiness and stuff, and.
Well, Roger over on YouTube is saying that he understands that Hayden has said in interviews and on the Blu-rays that he tried to mimic James Earl Jones. So maybe we'll do an investigative report.
We'll have to dig up the audio on this. And I just thought that it wasn't likely.
All right. Let's open up the.
I'm not going to throw down and get in a big debate about it, and let's find some of that audio. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear Hayden talking about it.
Well, let's talk to Nashville, Tennessee. We've got Nashville on the line. You're on with Rebel Force Radio. We're talking about Shattered. Are you feeling shattered, Nashville?
I do. Hey, this is Marcus. How are you guys?
All right, Marcus.
Marcus. How are you, Marcus? Yes, we know Marcus.
Hey, guys.
How are you? Yes, we're coming out there. Rebel Force Radio is coming to Nashville. We're going to hang with stormtroopers. We're going to drink beer. We're going to eat barbecue when this crazy quarantine gets lifted and we have the green light and confidence.
Sounds good to me.
Hold on a second. Is this Marcus aus Deutschland?
Yes, this is.
Ja.
Tag, Marcus. Ja. Wie geht es Ihnen?
Gut, danke. Wie geht's dir?
Ich bin gut, danke. Ich bin gut.
Nick Sheeson.
All right, talk Clone Wars. What do you got, Marcus?
All right, we got that.
Wir müssen sprechen.
No. Don't answer that, Marcus.
All right, so guys.
Yes.
So this was mentioned in the chat. This was mentioned by Kevin. Those, 2-3 minutes of no dialogue and just, Blade Runner-esque, Vangelis-esque music was, to me, the best 3 minutes of all the Clone Wars. Anything. The pressure that Ahsoka felt, and the relief, but also the maybe agitation, what's about to come, was so overwhelming, and it weighed so much on me that I had to rewatch that scene over and over again.
The Order 66 moment when she's experiencing what's happening.
No.
What moment are you talking about?
When they carted Maul. No. When they caught Maul and they were, he was in that apparatus.
Yeah.
And they were hauling him onto the ship, and they were flying off. All that whole scene with no dialogue. That was amazing. And just the music. That
was the part that I was talking about, Jason, where when Bo-Katan said goodbye to Ahsoka, until she spoke to Rex on the bridge, was like 2.5 minutes, which is a long time for a 24-minute episode where there was no talk. There was just her. Looking at Maul and looking out at the stars, and it was because you knew what was coming, and it was really impactful.
Yeah. That's it.
Well,
all I got.
All right, Nashville. Marcus, thanks very much. Appreciate it, man. There's no doubt that Kevin Kiner's contribution to Star Wars storytelling has been great. Marcus has already been let go. We actually have
okay.
Yeah. We've got Alex.
What'd you want to say, Bill?
Well, I wasn't sure if I misheard him. If he said the music sounded like Vangelis. Is that what I?
Like the Blade Runner soundtrack.
Okay. I was wondering what movie he was referring to. I mean, I know there's Chariots of Fire.
He wasn't referring to Chariots of Fire. No.
Gotcha.
Ben Cross. All right. I think we've got. Is this Alex that's joining us? Hello, Alex.
Yes, sir. Glad to be talking to you again.
Oh, nice to be talking to you. I think we just spoke to you. What last week or a couple weeks ago? I think
Week before last.
Week before last. All right. Well, welcome back to Rebel Force Radio. We're talking about Order 66 and Shattered. What do you got for us?
Well, I got to keep this conversation on the oxygen of Star Wars.
Okay.
Particularly right as Ahsoka leaps into action when Anakin's Dark Deed starts playing, that beautiful track from the Maestro. And I made a little connection there because we get that track a lot earlier in the timeline here than we do in Revenge of the Sith. So the first people that Anakin actually cares about very deeply to be affected are Ahsoka and Rex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that was some great foreshadowing by the soundtrack, and also, Ahsoka knows what she knows. She got that info from Maul, and she has no reason to think he was BSing her. So she's aware. She's the first one who's really aware of the potential of Anakin to slide to the dark side. Probably even more so than Kenobi at this point. I think Obi-Wan suspects something.
Yeah, for sure.
But Ahsoka's the first one to actually hear someone say it, and especially someone connected to the dark side like Darth Maul, who has a history with Darth Sidious. When he says he had a vision like that, you have to take him seriously. And I find it so compelling that here we are going into the final episode of the entire series, and Ahsoka is sitting on that little secret. I just love that. So she has to interfere somehow with Anakin. There has to be some sort of way they communicate, either via the Force or via hologram or somehow. There has to be some sort of message that gets delivered between the two of them. But I personally think Ahsoka believes Anakin dies. By the end of the last episode, I don't think Ahsoka's really going to think about Anakin flipping to the dark side. I think she's going to assume he died in combat. And I think that's going to
Maybe. I feel like she has the foundation to believe that, but also to mislead herself into thinking that, sort of a denial thing.
Could be. Speaking of denial, Alex, since we have you on the line, I'm going to throw my next question that was originally intended to one of our guests. I'm going to throw it to you, which is Rex. Order 66 comes down. He hears the word from Palpatine. He is the only one that we know of that has a moment of hesitation. The fists, the hands shaking. He realizes he only has seconds to get some sort of word or of warning to Ahsoka, and you got to get fives. You got to get a hold of fives. What is it, do you think, that allows Rex to have even that infinitesimal, and you know what word I'm trying to say, infinitesimal? I think that's the right word. Moment of time that allows him to get that word of warning when we see Cody doesn't. He just opens fire on Obi-Wan. What is it about Rex, you think? And this is all speculation. We don't have anything to go from. But why is Rex able to get that little tiny bit of space in between getting the order and destroying Ahsoka?
Well, Rex is the only one that's seen the evidence. He recognizes the situation and what's happening.
That's
because
right.
He saw what Five experienced, and he watched his brother be killed right in front of him after going through all of that conspiracy and trying to convince somebody that this is what's happening, there's a plot, and we need to do something about it.
Yes. Good job, man. You saw him struggle with this programming that he's gone through because he is exhibiting free will. And so there's this battle going on inside of him. And so he's getting all twitchy, he can't really just pull out, smoothly make his orders become executed because he is just like so twitchy, and he says he can't even think straight. He just leave her to me. I'm going to take care of her.
Right.
And he's trying to figure it all out, like in seconds, and he can't help himself. He has to respond to the way he's been programming.
And there's a validation that the audience gets through that too, because like I mentioned earlier, we don't get really into the weeds in terms of the ethics of creating clones, but the series has over and over tried to establish these clones as individuals in various ways. And so, a moment like this kind of validates that yes, these guys are programmed. Yes, they're created for a single purpose. Yes, they're being used. But there is a value in there that is uniquely their own. They are individuals. After all is said and done, there is a semblance of, as my brother said, free will underneath all that. So that's pretty important, I think, to see from at least one of them.
Well, appreciate the call. Thank you very much, Kevin. I want to ask you before we go to our next caller. Why Maul? When the Order 66 comes down. They're very explicit. I believe the term they use is Jedi leadership, and any soldier that does not comply with the order, they have to be executed. He says Jedi leadership, and then he dispatches the troopers to go off and off Maul. Is Maul a part of this assassination moment because he is a force wielder, or because he's Darth Maul and he has secrets? Why were they so quick to say off Maul?
That's a good point, because the thing is that we always thought Order 66 was to kill all the Jedi, take every Jedi out because of what Mace Windu illegally did. But that's a different story. Anyway, he said he might have improvised and said, you know what, Darth Maul's close enough. I doubt that the Order 66 was kill all the Jedi and Darth Maul. But it might have been not as broad as that. It might not have been kill all the Jedi. It might have been kill all the Force users that are not Darth Sidious.
I don't think so.
What they say,
to be honest, my original opinion is that Rex was improvising, and he just said, we'll kill him.
No, he was. Jim, I heard specifically Jedi leadership. Is that what you heard as well?
Yeah. Well, to all the clones, the Jedis are leaders because they're generals in the army. So I think he was talking from his perspective as a clone when he said Jedi leadership. He didn't mean like the leadership of the Jedi. He meant the leadership of the army.
I assumed he meant top generals, those types.
Well, those were the guys who were with the clones to begin with, the likes of Plo Koon and Aayla Secura, et cetera, and Ahsoka Tano. And I don't think the clones really differentiate at all whether Ahsoka is pledging her loyalty to the Jedi Council or not. They just know who she is. They've had a history with her. They still consider her to be a Jedi. She falls under Order 66, no problem. But with Maul, the thing is with Maul is we talked about this earlier in the show. Bo-Katan, we assume, would have just assassinated Maul, but Ahsoka was taking him into custody because that's what the Jedi Council wanted. Now we're in an era post Order 66. The Jedi Council has no authority anymore over the clone army, and they're considered the enemy. And so Darth Maul has got to be considered by Captain Rex an immediate liability. What are we carrying this guy around for? He's dangerous. He's a force wielder. He causes mass destruction wherever he goes.
Chaos.
And the only reason we're transporting him is to present him in front of a Jedi Council that doesn't exist anymore. Kill him. Rex is just being pragmatic at that point.
Gotcha. So what Kevin is saying, he's improvising a little bit here.
For sure.
All right, let's go back to the phones. We've got Melissa. She's calling in, I believe, from Portland, Oregon. Melissa, you're on with Rebel Force Radio. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Loud and clear.
Sweet. Wow, yeah. I'm just excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you on.
I feel like I have way too much to say, so I'll try and keep it non-tangential.
Swank says the same thing before every show.
Yeah. So I feel like one of the things I appreciated well, among other things, but one of the biggest things I loved about this episode was that it just started to fill in the gap between Clone Wars and Rebels, with Ahsoka and Rex's relationship. Because we see them in Rebels when they come back, and they got this really, really, like, obviously there's a lot more history beyond just the Clone Wars that has happened between them. And it was really interesting to see, the start of that bond. Like, when they're talking about, when Ahsoka is saying, I've never known anything other than the war. And Rex, you mentioned this earlier in the episode. And I thought it was really beautiful to start seeing kind of the bleed into Rebels and to kind of start seeing, okay, these are how these characters got there.
Melissa, are you suggesting that you think there are more Ahsoka and Rex adventures beyond the events of what we're about to see with Clone Wars?
Well, in Rebels, of course.
There are in Rebels, but I'm talking about in between.
I think if we don't take into consideration the Ahsoka novel at the moment in this particular conversation, I think if we don't take that into too much consideration, I think that absolutely there are Rex and Ahsoka adventures in the future, and especially if there happens to be an Ahsoka series in the near future. Maybe that's me thinking too optimistically, but I think absolutely there's a chance.
Well, so what happens in this Ahsoka novel that throws everything out of whack?
If I remember correctly, Ahsoka goes off and pulls up on another planet for a while, basically until Bail Organa contacts her in regards to starting a rebellion. That's what I remember. And so she basically was kind of in the way outer rim doing mechanic work or something like that.
With the Rafa sisters, I'm sure.
Ugh.
I think it was someone different, but something similar. There was a similar dynamic, I believe.
The Martez sisters. I shouldn't call them the Rafa sisters, but you know what I'm talking about when I call them Rafa sisters, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so Melissa, you said you had so much. All right, so the first thing on your mind is this relationship between Rex and Ahsoka. What else you got for us?
So maybe this is tying in some content from the last episode that you guys released in regard with the interview with Matt. And one thing that you guys talked about that I was so excited that you guys brought up that I still feel like is relevant in this episode is you guys mentioned the idea that if Ahsoka had been able to talk to Anakin before he went dark, would there have been a chance that Anakin could have been saved? And that made me really excited, mostly just maybe I just keep thinking too much about the connection between the end of Clone Wars and Rebels, but in the interaction between those two characters in that show, we hear Vader say to Ahsoka, you left me. And my argument for the last few years has always been that if basically the falling of Ahsoka from the Jedi Order, it wasn't in her control, and she was, basically abandoned by them in a sense. But if that hadn't happened, if Ahsoka had still been able to stay in the Jedi, stay as a Padawan, stay as a Jedi, I personally believe that Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order was the first step of Anakin falling to the dark side. And then that was really, and I mean, I'm sure this isn't that surprising, but seeing that, and then we see, I feel like at least Anakin's demeanor changes so much after Ahsoka leaves in Clone Wars. And I don't know, I think at least that thought holds a lot of merit.
I like it. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the first step of him falling toward the dark side, but I think it's a very important moment in his relationship with the Force. I personally think his first legitimate step into the dark side is when he massacred that camp of Tusken Raiders, killing men, women, and children. That's a tough one to live down, and definitely some street cred in your attempt to become a Sith Lord. But I think you're right on, though, that there was something about Ahsoka that Master Yoda recognized. Something about her connection to the Force, something maybe in the Force itself nudging Yoda to that place where he finally assigned her to Anakin Skywalker, surprising Anakin and Star Wars fans everywhere. Even Dave Filoni was surprised when George Lucas pitched the idea of Anakin being Ahsoka being Anakin's
He
Padawan.
argued back with him. He's like, but he doesn't have a Padawan.
Yeah. He doesn't have a Padawan. And then Lucas is like, well, yeah, he does. Sure he does. Yeah. Sure he does. Why not? So,
can I pose a question?
There was something that Yoda recognized. I mean, Ahsoka wasn't randomly assigned to Anakin Skywalker. There was something about her that made that assignment happen. It was, I think, the tremor of the Force that Yoda was feeling and had to act upon.
All right, Bill?
Can I ask a question? Wait,
hold on. Bill had he raised his hand first.
Okay.
Bill, go for it.
Melissa, just to clarify, I'm just kind of curious. So, are you saying?
Well, Melissa, I'm sorry, Melissa. We've already let Melissa go.
Well, I'll throw this out to you guys then. So, would you say Ahsoka's influence on Anakin is possibly in the sense that he feels she betrayed him, or is it that her questioning of the Jedi Council kind of got the wheels rolling in his head? What type of influence?
Oh, so like she could have been a bad influence on him. She could expose things about the Jedi and the Jedi Council and the entire organization that Anakin meditated.
I don't know about in the sense of exposing them, but just kind of ideologically challenging them, questioning them by leaving. So did he influence her in that way, or did he influence her? Did she influence him in the sense that he was hurt by her because he felt abandoned or betrayed?
All right, fair. Can I give my 2 cents on this?
Please.
Yeah.
Okay, so this might be a little long, but so I think Palpatine had orchestrated Tarkin.
Who?
Palpatine. He could call him that, just as long as you don't call him Sheev, which is fingernails on a chalkboard.
Okay, how about this? The legal ruler of the galaxy,
duly elected.
The duly elected ruler of the galaxy. So you can't say not my emperor. He's your emperor. He is your emperor. He was pushing Tarkin to bring Ahsoka's trial outside of the Jedi because Palpatine wanted Ahsoka away from Anakin. He wanted her away from Anakin because he felt that she would have been a bad influence on him and keep him from what he wanted. Now, if you remember the end of The Phantom Menace, why was Darth Maul on Naboo? Why would he send his Sith Lord, his second in command, to Naboo when all he needed from Naboo had already happened? Naboo was invaded, and they looked like the victim, and that's how he became Chancellor. Why send his important asset there to get killed? Because he felt it was important enough to send Maul down there to kill Qui-Gon Jinn, because he knew that if Qui-Gon Jinn raised Anakin, if Qui-Gon Jinn was his master, he wouldn't have been able to turn him. And that's why he wanted any other master to deal with him but Qui-Gon Jinn. So I think Palpatine spends a lot of time making sure that people aren't influencing Anakin that can ruin his legal rule of the galaxy.
So you think that Palpatine was watching Anakin all the way prior to the "we'll watch your career with great interest" line?
Of course.
Oh, I think Palpatine knew who Anakin was 5 years before that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Possibly 10 years before that.
All right. Well, let's see what other folks think. We've got eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Let's go with Is this Rich Brendel? I'm hoping that it is. Hello?
Hey guys, yes it is.
I chose you, Rich, because I think today is your birthday. Is it not?
Tomorrow is.
Tomorrow's your birthday. I knew we were close. Well, happy birthday, Rich.
Yeah. Thanks. Happy birthday, guys. Thanks for remembering.
May the 4th birthday. Oh no, tomorrow's May the 3rd.
May the 3rd.
Does everyone go through that during
the
day it is? You don't know where you are half the time. I put out a tweet that we were doing the show on Friday, and it was this morning. So I don't know where I am. So.
Well, anyway, good to hear from you, Rich. What do you got for us on the episode Shattered?
So one thing that kind of always shocked me a little bit was how the Jedi didn't predict this. They acted way too. I mean, they acted like way too. I mean, they didn't act soon enough. Obviously, if you look at like a modern day aspect of it, it's like you see all the stores and everything now requiring to wear these face masks for COVID-19, where that should have been done like a month ago. And that's kind of like what the Jedi are doing here.
Okay.
So,
bringing it around to current events. I like that, Rich. Keep it evergreen, buddy.
Yeah. when Mace says, I seek a plot to destroy the Jedi, it's like, yeah. Didn't you kind of figure that out already? And like, they figured that out already with like the Sifo Dyas episode and the episode with Fives where they found the implant in his
well, this is
head.
This is where we come back to this idea of hubris, the Jedi, having been in their position for a millennia, as Ki-Adi-Mundi says, the Sith have been out of play for a millennia. The Jedi have been in power. So, that's a long time, and you do tend to rest on your laurels. So I can see why they might have gone down that road and thought of themselves as perhaps maybe not invincible, but certainly difficult to overtake.
Oh, listen to this. Hold on, Rich.
I found that real interesting.
Wait a minute, we got something coming up here. What do we got, Jim?
Well, I just wonder if we're going to see this happen in the next episode. Anthony posted this on Facebook at facebook.com/Rebel Force Radio. He says, in the novel Ahsoka, I think it mentions Rex helped Ahsoka fake her death so that the Empire wouldn't go looking for her. So maybe see that in this final episode coming up on May the 4th. So I don't know. See, I didn't read that book. But I hope some elements, something like that, comes up in this episode. I heard some people saying that there were things in that novel that were already being contradicted by these episodes, but I don't recall exactly.
There are some details. For example, in the novel, Maul is trapped inside of a ray shield rather than that elaborate Mandalorian.
Iron Maiden.
The Iron Maiden.
Yeah. Did Liell just leave? Look at this guy.
Oh, he just
walks out.
Maybe he needed a break. We're getting old here. Yeah. Our bladders don't
hey, Rich,
the durability that they used to.
Happy birthday, buddy. Rich
doesn't like me.
Rich is
he heard
also...
my voice, he was like...
Rich is also an RFR Hall of Famer. Rich, happiest of happy birthdays to you tomorrow, pal. We appreciate the call. We've got so many. We got to move along, but happy birthday to you. No, Lyle's back. Do you feel better?
Yeah, that actually wasn't Rich Brendel calling. I actually do a really good Rich Brendel imitation, and I was on the other phone calling him.
Never in the same room at the same time.
Okay, let's see who else we got here. Oh man, thank you guys so much. The switchboard is completely jammed. Let's go to Ogden, Utah. Hello, Ogden. You're on with Rebel Force Radio.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Doing great.
Hey guys, good to talk to you again. Hey,
likewise.
Just to go back really quick, you guys were just talking about how the Jedi couldn't have detected all this, and I've always looked at everything going on with Palpatine and Order 66.
Palpatine.
And I think
tin, like tin can.
Yeah, Palpatine. That's right, Palpatine. It's like that old saying, how do you boil a frog, right? Just slowly.
Right.
And this has been a long game for Palpatine for years and years and years. And so the Jedi have just slowly become more and more clouded. And you just don't realize how disconnected you are from the Force until it's too late.
Yeah, that's a really good point that it is. And this is Daniel, right? Daniel Larson?
Yep.
All right. Daniel, thanks so much. That's a really good point, guys. We think that this stuff is just overnight. It's not overnight. It's over years. It's over decades. And I like what he says. It's that adage about, you boil a frog or boil a lobster or whatever. You do it slowly. They don't even realize that they're being cooked. And I think that's what position the Jedi find themselves in. There is that moment when Ahsoka is able to retrieve the records from the astromech droid, and not only does she find that Fives was able to develop this he was able to sort of go off script, off model of the rest of the clone troopers, and but the bigger point is that Rex filed what they call a grievance. Rex disagreed with the official report findings and went on record to say that he thought that there was something else going on with this, that the inhibitor chips were put into the clones for some other reason. So whereas the Jedi, for whatever reason, the Jedi and the Senate kind of glossed over this blip on the radar. Jim, Rex was the one that felt it was his duty to go on record and say that he really felt that this was something that was pointing to a larger issue. Yeah. He discovered he had Chromecast when he really wanted Apple TV. Plugged into his HDMI port there. It's interesting to see how Ahsoka kind of what did she do to make the chip inactive? She put his head into some sort of radiation there.
Well, he performed surgery. You can see the mark on his head afterwards.
It was a surgical bay, and she's stalling, and the droid is finally able to locate the inhibitor chip, and then he goes into the surgical tube, and But you're right.
It was how they get that call back to Chirrut in Rogue One with the "I am one with the Force. The Force is with me. I'm with the Force. The Force is with me." Whatever that mantra is.
The Guardian mantra, they call it.
They call it what?
The Guardian mantra.
Where are you getting this information from?
The internet.
Oh. Is there like official information, or is that just what fans are calling it?
That's what Wikipedia calls it, the Guardian mantra.
The Guardian mantra. Okay, whatever. I thought it was.
I think it's Chirrut's mantra because that's the only time I've ever heard it before. Yeah.
It's rap. We call it because the kids like the hip hop.
Did you guys catch in the beginning when this happened the first time seeing this that Rex tells Ahsoka to look for a record on Fives? Because I didn't catch that the first time I saw it.
Yeah, he does.
And because I don't know about
That's
you.
when he's got the guns pointed and he's all shaky.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what I do when I end a Clone Wars episode, I call up Glenn Nelson from High Adventure, and we talk about it. He picked that up. I didn't even notice it when he's like, find fives. And then she looks it up and finds out.
You had to call your lifeline for that, Kevin?
Excuse me?
You had to call your lifeline for that one?
Yeah. Maybe
I missed that one little part. I didn't call him to ask. We were just talking about it, and he brought it up, and I'm like, oh, I didn't notice that. It was very quick. It was 2 sentences.
Billy, there was a badass...
We'll just call Glenn next time and cut the middleman out. I'm just busting balls.
Billy, there was a badass moment. You gotta love the march that Maul goes on through the hallways. Very Vader-esque. He's pulling panels off the walls, using them to decapitate soldiers. This is the kind of stuff that we've been wanting to see Vader do since Rogue One, right?
There were some creative kills in there. Do you remember? There's some like documentary footage, or one of those documentaries where Lucas is going, they just want to see Vader kill people. That's it. Just want to see him kill people.
Yeah.
You know, and we're going, yes, just don't killing people, please. So it's
sadistic.
Little bit of action, and hey, I mean, how many times have you seen those glass doors close and want to see what happens when somebody's arm is in there? I mean, come on. I mean, that was great. That was great.
No.
Big shout out to FX7 in this episode, by the way. I was happy to see FX7 get some action.
That's right. I love that.
Well, it's so cool because, I mean, you know, the action figure, I mean, there was like one picture of the thing. It's so many of these characters, I mean, they're in the background. They're just static things. You look at the action figure, and it's supposed to be a medical droid. You know, I mean, if something's going to be performing surgery, it better be pretty pinpoint accurate. And this thing has a big claw in the middle of its chest, you know? Like, what the hell are you supposed to do with that? Well, we got to see if that worked, you know? So that was kind of cool. I still, we didn't see all the little arms, though, did we? Those didn't come into play this time, I don't think. But
no, you're right.
But anyway, yeah.
No,
back to your point, though. Great Maul stuff.
I like to think that that's the same
quality kills, as Buzz Kilman used to say.
That's right. Hey, listen, I like to think that is the exact
I lost my audio.
Well, then just hold up. Is everyone connected?
I am.
Okay, Jason.
Yeah,
I don't have audio.
Well, apparently Bill had a problem, so we'll let him figure that out. But I was going to say that I like to think that that's the very same FX7 medical droid that we see on Hoth in Empire Strikes Back.
They probably made thousands of them, though.
I know, but just for myself, I like to think that. So I'm sure there's some blurb. That's a different Star Wars thing. Some blurb on Wikipedia that will contradict my dream of that being the same FX.
Same droid.
But
yeah,
I think so. Tyler Page, my buddy, says in the chat, love FX7. So does Lord Heg. So yeah, we're all like FX7 guys.
Awesome. All right, let's go to back to the phones here. We've got, I believe this is Landon, I think, calling in from Oregon. Hello, You're on with Rebel Force Radio. Is this Landon?
Yo!
Hey!
Rebel Force Radio, this is Landon.
All right,
this is Landon. Indeed. Guys, I'm shattered. Jimmy, I have something to tell you, okay? And I'm 18. I'm a young man. I shouldn't be crying out here. But I'm telling you, that music, it got me. I was in the moment, and I saw that tear come from Rex's eye, and one came from my eye at the exact same time. I just want to say sorry and confess to y'all.
No, you shouldn't.
It shouldn't happen. So.
No, you shouldn't apologize. Not at all.
Okay. I grew up with Rex, like in Ahsoka. They're my friends. I grew up with them through my life, and yeah.
Yeah, well, you were 6 years old when the Clone Wars debuted, dude. You were 6.
Exactly.
And now you're
my nostalgia.
Yeah, now you're an adult, and it's been with you the whole time, and so now it's all coming to an end. So this is your Star Wars.
Indeed.
You know?
It is. This is my Star Wars. James Filoni, he's my man. He's my Lucas.
That's awesome. I love this kind of criticism. Say that again.
Yeah, thanks, man. I had some thoughts about some stuff that I wanted to throw out to you guys.
Well, go for it.
Okay, so Order 66, right? I was thinking, like, what are the three main powerhouses at the time? We got the Separatists, we got the Republic, and then we got the Mandalorians. And I've never really thought as the Mandalorians like that before, but I was just getting to thinking with, like, the clones and stuff. Like, I know Almec says all that crap about how it's not a Mandalorian and stuff like that, and maybe that's true, but I don't know. I don't think Palpatine maybe had this in mind, but I feel like he didn't only just take down the Republic and the Separatists and make the Empire, but he also took down another force, which is the Mandalorians, and how this Order 66 is almost a linchpin, not only for, like, the original trilogy, but even when we go to things like Mandalorian and Mandalorian culture in general. I mean, I didn't know it at the time when I was watching Revenge of the Sith, but it was a linchpin almost for that, and maybe like poetry, because George Lucas is all about the rhyming. Dave Filoni and even Lucas before that talked about, and you guys talked about it even on this, about a struggle between the Jedi and the Mandalorians even before all this. And so it makes me wonder if if they're alluding to something that Filoni plans on showing us. Anyway, sorry, that was my spill of my mind that's racing right now.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Landon. That's a lot to unpack. Jim?
Well, just at the very least, I can say that I believe that we are seeing some groundwork being laid for future stories, maybe to be picked up via The Mandalorian or some other animated or live action project in the future. We might not even realize where the breadcrumbs are going to lead us at this moment, but wouldn't surprise me if we look back at some of these episodes here in season 7 of the Clone Wars and go, oh, so that's where that came from in the future, when it comes to future Star Wars stories. So,
yeah. All right.
Hey,
Billy's back. All right.
There he is.
All right. Well, we've got time for just a couple more phone calls. And by the way, I think Jim brought up the topic of continuity. We were talking about the Ahsoka novel, and also, of course, there's continuity in terms of Star Wars Rebels. Going back to the Lost Commanders episode of Rebels, where Rex talks about the fact that he had his chip removed, which is why he didn't turn on Ahsoka. So we had heard this story before, but he said he had his chip removed. He didn't actually say that it was Ahsoka that removed the chip. And he also left out the part about how he initially attacked Ahsoka before that chip was removed. So we're getting a little bit more of the details there. The episode ends up where it wraps up where, it's Rex and Ahsoka versus the galaxy. Where do they go from here? It's unclear as to what Ahsoka really knows as the fate of her master. But clearly, the stakes are super high for both of them, and we're going to find out. I think, guys, that this is going to be a little bit like, at the end of Revenge of the Sith, where we see in the cutscenes, we see Yoda landing on Dagobah. In the film itself, we actually see Obi-Wan turning the twins over to we're turning Luke over to Lars. We see the Leia on Alderaan with Organa. We're going to see a moment here where Ahsoka ends up where Ahsoka ends up and Rex ends up where he ends up. At least that's what I think, though Melissa, who called a little bit ago, thinks that there's still more adventures of Rex and Ahsoka to be told in between Rex's retirement, fishing on that desert planet, and Ahsoka going in full-time as the Fulcrum. But let's go back to the phone. So we've got, Ohio calling in. We've got Dover, Ohio. Is this Brent?
Yes, Brent. Yep.
Hey, Brent.
Hey, guys. Speculating about where Ahsoka and maybe Rex end up on the next episode. My speculation is I think that she may go to where she last thinks Anakin is at, which would be Coruscant. And could she maybe be there going through the Jedi Temple before Obi and Yoda show up, or after they, sever the message, sending out to all Jedis to go back there?
That's a good question. And so let's just speculate on what's going to happen in this next episode. Ahsoka will pick up that signal that's being sent on that private frequency, and she's going to avoid Coruscant altogether and go into hiding. I don't think we'll see Ahsoka return to Coruscant ever, just because that seems to be pretty big and bold of an idea to present for the very last episode. But I could be wrong. These guys plan it hop like nobody's business. So, it's possible. I just think that's so. It's a wonderful idea, but I fear it's just a little complex to pull off in the final episode. So I think it's a little bit more convenient for the storytellers to just have her pick up that single and avoid Coruscant altogether. I personally would love to see what you're proposing.
Jim, you said was it last week?
We keep on getting threats from Rots, and that's why I didn't know if they would throw that last one in, because I definitely don't think any Mustafar that would just totally mess stuff up. Wasn't making any sense.
Yeah. I wonder if we'll see any more of Palpatine's Force children nursery that you had there on the planet Mustafar.
Well, and is there any breadcrumbs that are going to lead to the Inquisitors too? Because
good one, yeah.
That's a plot hole. I mean, not a plot hole. I don't mean that. It's an opportunity to tell more stories.
Yes.
All right, we're gonna do one more call, and just a reminder, we'll be back in just a couple of days once we see what happens with the very next episode, which I believe is called Victory and Death. That's going to happen on May the 4th, and Rebel Force Radio will be back with you all, leading you through this discussion. So a huge thanks to everybody that's been listening to us live, as well as those that have been patient and waiting on the line. Let's talk to, I believe this is Maurice. Do we have Maurice in Rochester? Hello, Maurice.
Hey, it's actually Nate in Rochester.
Oh, sorry, Nate. These screeners aren't exactly these screener droids aren't the best, but it's great to talk to you. You're the final caller, so make it good, as Jimmy Mack would say.
Yeah. Oh, I got some good shit for you guys. Oh, good stuff for you guys. Sorry. So first off, did you guys see the Disney Plus mural that they put up for May the 4th?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. The mural.
Yeah, I saw it. It has like it's similar to the mural they had at Celebration. They have like all the main characters, Rey and Luke, and so it came out a day or two ago.
Well, who's the most important character on the bottom right?
I don't know. I haven't seen this. Kevin, you're the only one I think that's seen this on the call.
The bottom right. I can't recall off the top of my head. It's not Luke or Rey because they're up on the top in the middle.
Well, it's Rose Tico, of course.
Get out of here.
Come on.
Rose Tico is on the bottom right. She's the most important character, right?
Well, where do we see this?
What is? Wait.
You got to go on Disney Plus.
All right. Well, you know what? We'll look at this after the show. What are you doing?
Yeah, that's just throwing it out there.
All right.
Oh, the only thing I wanted.
You're trolling us. You're trolling Swain.
Oh no, I'm not trolling you guys.
He's trolling me because I'm the one who came out as a Rose hater like a year ago on this show.
No. Rose is great. I found it hilarious that she was on the bottom right-hand corner. Main mural for.
Listen, leave us with something other than Rose is great, okay?
I will. And what I think is great. All right, so this is great stuff, right? So I've been listening to you guys. Thank you. By the way, thank you for taking my call. I've been listening to you guys for years, and yeah, absolutely. And I've been listening to all the roundtables for years, and one thing you guys always harped on years ago was how nothing really was linear with the Clone Wars. Like it always was, you'd have an arc here, an arc there, and then it would just kind of go to something else, and just kind of you always wanted stuff to kind of link back to the old arcs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what I find is amazing about season 7 is that all that stuff that we watched for 6 seasons all converges on season 7. And I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that. I mean, you can go back to the main arc from the movie to all the Zero the Hutt stuff, all that stuff. I mean, it's all you have the Maul kind of takes over the underworld, and the Night Sisters and the Mortis trilogy and the Citadel and all the stuff just really just links all, and it's masterclass in storytelling when you have all that stuff and it just kind of all converges on the Siege of Mandalore. And I just wanted to hear you guys' thoughts on that, and I'll take my answer off of the air. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Nathan. Appreciate it. So I do think that he is right in that this, Dave Filoni at the helm of this has really, I think, brought all of the various paths down to this destination of the final episode. It does kind of all tie in together. If you look at there's definitely a mythology that runs through the Clone Wars. We used to talk about it like X-Files. There were mythology episodes, and then there were sort of these one-offs. But the mythology, if you look at it, in the Clone Wars, does definitely all have a purpose, and it does bring us to this point. I think that the the writers, Filoni, I think that they've artfully brought all of the threads together as best they can, tied it up a lot neater, in my opinion, than the sequel trilogy did. I mean, that was one of the things that kept running through my head as I'm watching this episode is I'm so much more invested in Rex than I ever was Rey or Finn or Poe Dameron. I have much more feeling towards him. I have infinite more feeling about Ahsoka than I do any of the sequel trilogy characters. Granted, we had the benefit of time, but we also had the benefit, I think, of tighter, more concise, and more consequential storytelling at the same time. But I think Nathan's point about how they are really wrapping this up very tightly and very well is a good one. And you could trace it all the way back to, what seems like a throwaway storyline about the underworld and establishing that underworld in the Clone Wars movie.
What I like about it is how it's connecting now directly into the Revenge of the Sith timeline. And that's something we always want to see, some crossover into episode 3. Because let's face it, the Clone Wars extend into the episode 3 timeline. So it's only natural that we'd want to see things from a different perspective. And that's where I think the real strength is coming from these final episodes is, yes, bringing together all of the mythology that this animated series had laid out over the past dozen years, but also at the same time seamlessly connecting and intersecting with the events of the cinematic Star Wars universe. And, Revenge of the Sith is a film that's been around for over 15 years now. And I think it's just great that we're able to continue to expand on that story while wrapping up this incredible ride we've been on with Ahsoka and Rex and the Clone Wars. What I really have been loving is seeing Darth Maul stalk around in those famous Imperial corridors with the pill lighting fixtures in the walls and seeing him just wreak havoc in there, because now we're seeing Darth Maul in some legitimately original trilogy environments. And I love how that is connecting the entire mythology together, beyond TV shows and trilogies and what have you. It's really tying it all up. And you can tell that we're going toward an ending that has been considered and thought about and refined and debated, and it's gone through its proper creative process over a long period of time.
The exact opposite of what we just witnessed with the sequel trilogy. The exact opposite.
Not being rushed to fit a schedule. It's something that has been in the incubator for a long time. And so we're going to get a fully fleshed out, fully realized story here that isn't being created just to have an event ready for a calendar date. It's bigger than that. It's something that just like episode 3 was a story that George Lucas had rolling around in his head for years and years. How long did we hear about the volcano duel between Vader and Obi-Wan? It wasn't until we finally got to episode 3 and it really felt like a fully fleshed out, fully realized, real story. So I see the same thing happening here. And I still feel the touch of George Lucas on this too. I feel his fingerprints all over this thing. So I think that's important too.
Totally agree there. In fact, when we talked to the Clone Wars cast, a couple of them, including James Arnold Taylor, said what an honor it was to be part of what may be the last George Lucas stories left to tell in the Star Wars universe. So it certainly wasn't lost on them. And what's not lost on me is just how great it is to have this group of folks here to talk about Star Wars. Thank you to everybody that called in, that was listening live as we broadcast on this Saturday evening. Thank you so much. Also, thanks to our panel, Kevin Liell. Appreciate it so much. You're always a treat. And you always bring a great perspective. We appreciate it. And you can see more of Kevin Liell over at NorseLegionStore.com. And Kevin, I know this is tough for you because you're a convention guy, and you do these great trivia contests, and you host these amazing panels. You're quite an interviewer, and with the lockdown and all, you're not able to do that. But how are you able to express your fandom without having access to those live events these days?
Well, thanks for bringing that up. We're doing. I'm actually doing a weekly show called The Con Panel, and you can find that on Facebook, The Con Panel. And we're just interviewing Star Wars actors for like half an hour, 40 minutes, and it's nothing like your show, which is news and analysis, which is great. Ours is just a straight up conversation where we talk to Star Wars actors. This week on Monday, May the 4th, we're talking to Sean Crawford and Tim Dry, who were the Yak Face and Jaquil from Jabba's Palace. And that'll be on Monday night for May the 4th. So that's what I'm doing.
Those guys, they have
nothing else to do.
They have such great stories, and if you're out there and you're listening to this, you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is an extra, and they have the best stories. These guys, they're so great. So where do you find that, Kevin?
You can go to the Con Panel on Facebook or on YouTube, and you can watch it live.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Take care, and of course, Billy Mack. Always great to talk to you, our puppet Lando, there in the man cave, surrounded by the baseballs and the Marx Brothers pictures and all of that. Since this is the first time we've had a chance to talk to you about Season 7, and you're a longtime listener you're a longtime watcher of the Clone Wars, where do you put this season in perspective for you as a fan?
Well, this final arc has really... my response to it emotionally has been stronger, and I hope this isn't hyperbole. I don't think it is. I've had more of an emotional response to these last couple episodes than I've had from any of these animated shows for quite a while. I mean, I literally was getting the goosebumps watching the Order 66 in this, which I wasn't expecting at all. So it's been great. It's gotten stronger. I wish all the episodes could be this strong. If only. Sometimes I wonder why they spend their time doing other things, but I'm really. I mean, if this is the way it all ends, I'll be satisfied. But I would like to see what happens after the Clone War. I hope they continue with something. I really do. But,
it's no surprise, Bill, that you're a fan favorite here on Rebel Force Radio. And if people can't get enough of Billy Mack, where online might they find more of you? Are you on Twitter these days? You're on Facebook?
Nowhere.
You're nowhere.
I don't.
Unless you see him here, folks, on Rebel Force Radio, you're not going to get any Billy Mack. We are the exclusive.
I like to maintain the exclusivity. Okay, so you guys got something really special here. I mean,
oh yeah.
Well, we appreciate it. We appreciate you and the life that you give to Puppet Lando. Which, by the way, Jim, someone said when they're looking back and they see Puppet Lando, they're saying, "Wow, the lockdown has really gotten to Puppet Lando. He hung himself there in Jimmy Mac's window."
Poor guy.
Oh, I thought he was just on Salacious Crumb's shoulders. I didn't know.
Oh, look at that! I didn't see the Salacious. There, look at that. There's the Salacious Crumb.
With Puppet Lando, you have to get him just right though, so he's not like this. It's just. That really creeps you out when you walk into the room and see that stuff going on.
All right. Well, how about some final thoughts, Jimmy Mack? Final thoughts in the penultimate episode of the Clone Wars. It's been a long time. One more episode to go.
Shocking, chilling, satisfying. There are just so many great things I can say about this episode, and I've pretty much said it all during this show right now. I really don't have any final thoughts. It's kind of bittersweet to think about the fact that we're heading into the final episode of this great run, this great ride. We've practically walked hand in hand with the Clone Wars throughout its history, as it sort of paralleled our history. And we made a lot of great friends with this series, and you've heard a lot of them recently on Rebel Force Radio. These people are legitimate friends of ours now through our our obsession with Star Wars and our love for this show and respect for their talent and contributions to the Star Wars saga, it will, something tells me it'll never be like this ever again. And that makes me feel kind of sad. So we're heading into the final episode. I've been staying up till 2 a.m. for each of them. It's been worth it. It's been great. I feel like I'm watching Star Wars history. Like, these are moments I'm always going to remember. And I'm so happy to be able to share it with our audience and with you guys and people like Chris on the YouTube, who he donated to us. He threw a couple bucks our way and says, the reason these eps feel so much like Star Wars is the epic scale. This is one of the biggest reasons the sequel trilogy doesn't feel as grand. Well, I didn't know there was a dig to the sequel trilogy when I started reading that. But it doesn't matter. I mean, it's fair that we compare Star Wars. We always have. We used to compare the prequel trilogy to the original trilogy, and we would compare Clone Wars to the prequel trilogy, and we would now it's fair to compare it all because we want it all to be cohesive. We want it all to be consistent, and we want it all to be epic. We want epic. There were times that the sequel trilogy felt a little small and boxed in compared to the grand scale of things, the visual grand scale of things that we're used to seeing from Star Wars. So yes, absolutely, epic scale. And I feel it. I feel like a lot of times I'm forgetting I'm watching animation. A lot of people are speculating that droid that sounded like Chopper and had that little antenna on top of his head that Ahsoka liberated, they're saying that we could be seeing like an early version of Chopper.
It is CH-33P, and it was voiced by Dave Filoni. So, who knows? That could be where Chopper comes
all I know is nobody can do a like Filoni. But no, that's interesting stuff. So we're starting to see, just these little Easter eggs here and there. Northern Canuck 77 says, big shout out to Mr. Liell for his service. So there you go. And a lot of love for Billy Mack. A lot of love for Billy Mack in the chat rooms as well. So we did get one other donation. Where did I see that? I just want to give him a shout out to our friend Isaacs, I guess it is. He's got a Boba Fett avatar. He says, great show, guys. Thanks for the blue milk, Kevin. Oh, so he's a survivor.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, last year's RFR live on the South Side.
Can I interrupt with one thing about that? I have a plan for the next Rebel Force Radio party at Celebration that I'm going to do for the guys who come, the fans that come out there. I don't want to say it yet, but I have an idea, and it's going to be kind of cool. And as if we have it in August, and it looks like we're probably not.
Right.
But there will be a celebration again. I know you guys will be there.
Sure.
I've got a plan, and I'll tell you guys offline if you want.
Yeah.
I have a plan of what we're going to do to your fans.
All right.
To do two of them.
As long as this doesn't require any amateur pyrotechnics, we're on board. So.
Yeah.
It may require bail money, but that's it.
Well, everything we.
All right. Well, tonight is not goodbye. It's just a quick farewell, a quick good night, because we'll be back in just a couple of days. With at least Jim and I will be back. We'll be bringing a couple of other guests with us to talk about the final episode. What's the name of it? Victory and Death. Wow. The drama just continues to ratchet up. All right, that's going to be it for us tonight. Thank you all so much. We love you. For Rebel Force Radio, I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Mack, and Nuke Unray not in this episode.
How about I'm Billy Mack, and I'm Kevin Liell.
I'm Billy Mack.
And I'm right about Palpatine.
And remember,
The Force will be with you always.
We'll talk more.
Palpatine.